The reason you snap over a minor issue isn't that you lack control, it's that you're unknowingly carrying the weight of a dozen hidden stressors. We'll show you the scientific mechanism that combines small problems into one giant meltdown.
Just let that sink in for a moment. Think about that last time you just completely lost it over something tiny. Spilling your coffee, not finding your keys. You know the feeling. I promise you, it was never about the coffee. It was a dam breaking. A dam that was built brick by tiny brick from all those little frustrations you've been ignoring.
So in this explainer, we are going to pull back the curtain on the actual science of that meltdown. We're going to show you the invisible architecture of your stress and explain how these tiny, seemingly harmless cracks in your foundation can lead to a total, catastrophic collapse. And here's the key. This isn't about willpower. It's about the physics of your own mind.
Okay, so are you ready to rebuild your emotional resilience from the ground up? Here's our blueprint. First, we're going to expose what I call the meltdown paradox. Then, we'll take a quick tour of your brain under pressure. After that, we are going to install a powerful new operating system, the Stress Stack Protocol. And finally, we'll give you a 15-minute reset button and the one single rule that changes everything.
So let's get right into it with the core idea here, the meltdown paradox. It's the strange truth that our biggest emotional breakdowns, they almost never come from our biggest problems. They're actually structural failures, usually triggered by the smallest, most insignificant little thing. And it's a paradox, right? Because the reaction feels completely, ridiculously out of proportion to the trigger.
And this whole phenomenon has a name, the stress stack effect. Now, the key words here are nonlinear. This means your stressors don't just add up 1 + 1 + 1. No, they multiply, they compound. Each little problem you ignore actually makes the whole structure weaker. Think of it like a game of Jenga. You can pull out a block, then another, and it all seems fine. But what you're really doing is secretly building instability until one tiny, final move and the whole thing comes crashing down. That right there, that's your stress stack.
Does that sound familiar? Having a huge, outsized reaction to some tiny little trigger? I want you to get this. That wasn't a failure of your control. It wasn't a character flaw. It was a system overload, plain and simple. Your cognitive and emotional circuits just blew a fuse. But the good news is, any system can be repaired.
Okay, so now that we get what is happening, let's explore why it's happening. To really fix this, we have to go inside your brain and look at the invisible architecture of stress. Forget feelings for a second. This is about brain cells, chemicals, and wiring. So the main culprits here are something we call ambient stressors. The best way to think of these is as tiny, invisible leaks in your mental energy tank. You know what I'm talking about. That unanswered email, the messy desk, that vague promise you made to someone, each one is a small, steady drip, draining your precious mental resources, one drop at a time.
And what exactly are they draining? They're draining your working memory. Now, your working memory is basically your brain's RAM. It's the mental countertop where you do all your active thinking. And here is the absolutely critical part. It is a finite resource. You only have so much. And every single one of those little open loops, those ambient stressors, is taking up a slot, leaving you with less and less brain power for focus, for problem solving, and most importantly, for regulating your own emotions.
Now, as your working memory gets clogged up, your brain's threat detector, a little almond-shaped area called the amygdala, it starts to get really antsy. It sees this constant overload as a threat, so it starts releasing a slow, steady drip of cortisol, the stress hormone. And while a burst of cortisol is great if you're, running from a tiger, this chronic low-level elevation acts like a chemical drag on your brain's higher functions. It literally makes it harder for you to think clearly and control your impulses.
So you end up with two very different states. On the left, you have a chronically drained system. You're running on fumes with high ambient stress, no mental bandwidth, and a hair trigger for a meltdown. But on the right, you have a resilient system. You're fully charged, stress is managed, your mind is clear, and you're ready for pretty much anything. Our entire goal here is to get you living permanently on the right side of this screen.
All right, enough about the problem. Let's start talking about the solution. And we're not just going to try to manage stress. We are going to systematically dismantle it with something called the Stress Stack Protocol. It is a dead simple, three-phase system for taking back control.
Here it is, the whole framework. First, we shine a bright light on all those hidden stressors with what we call the Ambient Stress Audit. Second, we're going to actually measure their impact with something called Cortisol Cost Quantification. And third, we'll start methodically eliminating them with the Proactive Closure Protocol.
Phase 1 is the absolute foundation. You have to do an ambient stress audit. What does that mean? It means you aggressively get every single open loop that's floating around in your head out and onto a piece of paper or a screen. Every vague commitment, every nagging task, every little point of friction. Don't judge them, don't prioritize them yet, just get them out. This is so much more than a to-do list. It's like a cognitive exorcism. You are literally evicting them from your precious working memory.
Okay, phase 2 is where we turn those vague feelings into hard data. You're going to look at your list, and for each item, you're going to assign it a cortisol cost on a scale of 1 to 10. How much is this one thing really draining you? That email from your boss you've been avoiding, that might be an 8. That pile of laundry, maybe a 4. And just like that, your vague sense of being overwhelmed becomes a clear, prioritized list of problems that you can actually solve.
And now for the fun part, phase 3, the proactive closure protocol. You take that quantified list, you find the high-cost items, and you attack them with quick wins. Now, a quick win is any task, any decision that takes less than 2 minutes to complete. Pay that bill online, send that 2-sentence email, schedule that appointment. The goal here isn't to clear your whole list. The goal is surgical, strategic action that closes the loops costing you the most mental real estate.
So why is this simple system so powerful? Well, the crucial point is this isn't just about feeling organized or checking things off a list. There is some hard neuroscience that explains why this protocol is so profoundly effective at resetting your system and preventing those meltdowns.
When you implement this protocol, you're basically launching a 3-pronged attack against stress. You're lowering your cortisol, you're freeing up your working memory, and you're building behavioral momentum. It's a triple threat. Let me show you how it works.
First, you stop what's called cortisol flooding. Remember that amygdala, your brain's threat detector? Well, all those little ambient stressors keep it in a constant state of low-level panic. By auditing and closing those open loops, you're sending a direct, powerful signal to your amygdala that says, hey, we're safe, things are under control here. This immediately calms it down, reduces that baseline drip of cortisol, and directly raises your entire overload threshold.
Second, you conserve that precious working memory. There's a fascinating psychological principle called the Zeigarnik effect, which basically says our brains are hardwired to obsess over unfinished tasks. So by writing them down and then closing them, you're providing what's called psychological closure. You're giving your brain permission to let go of those tasks, which instantly frees up a huge amount of cognitive bandwidth. And third, you harness the incredible power of behavioral activation. You see, when you complete even a tiny 2-minute task, your brain gives you a little hit of dopamine, the neurotransmitter of reward and motivation. The success of these quick wins creates this amazing positive feedback loop. One win makes the next one feel easier, and that generates real momentum that actively pushes back against feelings of helplessness and overwhelm.
Okay, theory time is over. Are you ready to actually put this into practice? This is where it all becomes real. Here is your step-by-step 15-minute plan to a calmer, more focused, more resilient you, starting today.
Here's the entire game plan boiled down into 3 simple, non-negotiable steps. First, you're going to spend just 10 minutes getting all those stressors out of your head and onto paper. Second, you are going to immediately knock out 3 quick wins. And third, you're going to learn a simple technique to stop a meltdown before it even starts.
And here's what that audit actually looks like in practice. Just look at the cortisol costs here. That unanswered email is an 8 out of 10. That is a massive cognitive drain. That unpaid utility bill is a 7. The magic of this is seeing that paying that bill, which is a 2-minute task, can eliminate a stressor that's more mentally exhausting than fixing that wobbly chair. You are now making decisions based on mental impact, not just urgency. Now this last piece, this is your emergency circuit breaker. The moment you feel yourself getting irritable or reactive or just overwhelmed, that's a signal that you're approaching your overload threshold. You must enforce a mandatory 2-minute pause. No exceptions. Just stop, breathe, then immediately go to your list and execute one quick win. This simple act stops a meltdown cold and completely resets your emotional baseline.
All of this brings us to the single most important distilled lesson of this entire framework. If you only remember one thing from our time together, please let it be this. This is the new rule for emotional stability.
Let that really land for a second. Your stability isn't determined by how well you handle the giant crises. It's determined by the size of your smallest, unaddressed problem. Your capacity to handle the big stuff isn't built by ignoring the small stuff. It's forged by aggressively, relentlessly managing the minor details before they ever get a chance to stack up against you.
So here's my challenge to you. Not next week, not when things calm down. Tomorrow. I want you to commit to one 10-minute stress audit and executing just 3 quick wins. That's it. It's a tiny investment of time, but I want you to feel what it's like to proactively offload that cognitive weight. I guarantee you will instantly feel your meltdown threshold go up.
So, let's tie this all together. What we've discussed today, the Stress Stack Effect Protocol, it's a direct solution for systemic emotional fragility and those meltdowns that seem to come out of nowhere. And why this matters so much is that it gives you a systematic way to conserve your brain's executive function and physically raise your cognitive threshold. By using the Cortisol Cost Quantification and the Proactive Closure framework, you are directly calming your amygdala and freeing up critical working memory. And in the end, you have to remember, productivity isn't about doing more, it's about mastering systems that make focus effortless.